a deposit system.
Okay, very good. We have a question from Steve in Hayward. Jack, I don't know if you're the right person for this one, but the question is, how much do food waste recovery programs cost?
Well, it really depends a lot on a particular program. If you have a residential program with a dedicated yard trimmings collection, adding food to that can have a small additional or no additional cost, maybe providing some additional education or a small kitchen pail for source separation. So for a residential program, it could be very marginal if you're adding it to an existing yard trimmings. For a commercial program, there could be a great additional cost, but you also have the avoided cost of disposal. And so it really depends on a particular community's efforts. But I think there are good examples in San Francisco, in Berkeley, in San Jose, where programs are being implemented that are fairly cost-effective.
If a person's community isn't doing, let's say, yard trimming collection or the food waste recovery, how can you encourage your local council people to get something like that on the board?
Well, I think you have to look at the waste stream in a particular community. And if you look at, given statewide, organics are 35% of what's going into the landfill. In a given community, it could vary, but it's likely to be at least 25% or more. You're saying if we're going to increase our diversion rate, this is a major chunk of material that we want to recover, and that there are facilities that can process this and benefit from it. And working with the hauler and looking at what those costs could be, I think that's a number of strategies that can be implemented.
Okay. We've got another question, and this one comes from Brandy in the city of El Monte. And the question is for Jack as well. The cost per ton for the San Francisco curbside food scrap program and the percent that's funded by the city.
Okay. We're looking, currently a trash disposal in San Francisco is approximately or over $150 per ton. And the cost for the organics portion, I think, is going to be somewhere in that ballpark of $130 to $150 a ton. There are different numbers. We're currently analyzing that. We've been doing mostly pilot programs so far. The three-stream Fantastic 3 collection you saw was a pilot program that's been implemented over the last year, and now we have the data that we can better project long-term costs. And so we're currently evaluating long-term cost projections that the hauler has provided us. But it looks like it could be less than or in the ballpark of our trash disposal cost.
And what percent of that was funded by the city?
Well, trash collection and recycling in San Francisco is funded through the rates. So residents pay as they throw based on the quantity of material they put out. So they pay just based on their trash container, but it covers the cost of recycling as well. So if there are additional costs, it would be covered through the rates.
Okay, very good. We have another question. This one comes from Gail in Fresno. The question is, we don't have a mixed C&D processor nearby. How can we get one? Panel, you want to take a shot at that?
I'll try, and then maybe somebody can elaborate. Yes, it's very challenging to get a mixed C&D facility, but it will help by talking to your local recycling providers, if there are any local providers that you have currently, to start conversation with them, talk about your needs, maybe go visit some of the C&D, mixed C&D debris facilities that was shown in the video, and try to get some ideas that way. I don't know if anybody else.
I would just like to add, in some cases it makes sense to work with the local disposal facility. In Fremont, for example, we have the Tri-Cities Recycling and Disposal Facility that does take in some mixed C&D waste and does divert it. So that may be another alternative.
And finally, I'd like to add, as an additional resource, I would encourage you to check up on the board's website. I know that there is a company down in the Central Valley, Croker Industries, that has done some tremendous work on mixed C&D projects. So please visit the board's website. There is a whole area on C&D diversion, and you might be able to find some businesses that could work in your community.
Very good. Here's another one. This one comes from George in Ukiah. George writes, I'm in a small town and it's hard to get our businesses to recycle. Any ideas on how to approach them? So approaching businesses. Any ideas, panel?
Well, I think one of the most common programs that is implemented is a mixed paper program. It really does go across industries, and it does make sense for many businesses to do that. One of the things that might be considered is some subsidized collection that has been done in some other communities where commercial recycling collection is handled through the rates. It's a surcharge to the commercial refuse rates, and that may be one way to implement a program. The other thing that can be done is to encourage businesses to use electronic commerce and information sharing as opposed to generating a lot of paper. So those are two ideas.
Also, maybe teaming up with the residential, if you have residential curbside recycling, you may want to talk to your hauler and see if they can make that extra stop during their route.
Okay, very good. It looks like we have a caller from Vancouver. Hi, could you identify yourself and tell us your question?
Hi, this is Rich McConaughey with the City of Vancouver. My question is, with so much paper still in the waste stream, how do we particularly look at getting that out to these small businesses, and particularly in an open market system where folks are free to choose their recycling?
Were you able to hear that panel? Can we get you to repeat that? I'm sorry, our audio was a little bit low.
I don't have audio, so I'll ask
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, it's so much paper in the waste stream. How do we target that for recovery, particularly for small businesses?
Very good. With so much paper in the waste stream, how do they target that for recovery, particularly with businesses?
Sure, I'll start off. One of the important first steps is looking at waste prevention. And one of the opportunities that you have is to work with your businesses, do some focus groups and outreach and education. It's truly amazing that just by looking at waste prevention, how much paper reduction you can get. And then the next step is then to focus on recycling, to work with the local haulers, and as Wendy mentioned, to try and see what's best in your community. For small businesses, some communities have tied it in with a curbside collection route. Other businesses have set up drop-off locations, so it just depends on what works best for your communities. What you will see from the case studies that have been developed for this video conference is a number of good examples on communities that have focused and been able to implement excellent diversion programs for their small business communities.
Okay, I hope we got your question answered, and thank you for calling all the way from Vancouver. This next question comes from Los Angeles, and Joan writes, will the Waste Board come to my city council and testify in support of a business incentive or a policy program? That's a good question. I guess, Karen?
I think I would.
Will you go to LA?
We absolutely will, and actually we were just at La Cañada Flintridge and spoke to their city council. I think that's a very important role, and the Office of Local Assistance can help you in that regard. We're happy to come and sit down with you, put together a presentation to meet your needs, to help your city council make the decisions they need to make to put the programs in place to meet the 50% diversion goal. So we're here to help, and you have our number.
Are you finding that most communities at this point are actively working to meet those goals? Are there any that are still in denial about AB 939?
That's a good question. I think that all of the communities that we have worked with really realize that meeting the 50% goal is important to their communities. A lot of, as Jack mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of infrastructure that has been put into it, a lot of capital investment. And this is a program that's here to stay, and communities are taking it seriously and implementing programs. And again, the board is here to assist those jurisdictions who may be behind the 8 ball and to help them get up to speed.
Very good. We have a faxed-in question from Nat from the city of Los Angeles. Nat wants to know if you have any suggestions for raising landfill rates. Anybody? Charging more to dump.
Well, I could just say that I know some jurisdictions, in fact, like in Alameda County, they have a surcharge that feeds into a recycling fund. So there are fees that can be levied on a landfill that would provide revenues that can go into recycling programs or infrastructure development.
I guess it depends whether you, as the local jurisdiction, own the landfills or they're privately owned and operated. That's a major component. As Jack mentioned, in Alameda County, actually the citizens of Alameda County passed a measure, it's called Measure D, and that requires a surcharge, a $6 per ton surcharge on the landfill, and the money is to be used for source reduction and recycling. So that's a way of doing that.
Okay, we have an email from Joan in Torrance who writes, our town is very conservative, and I don't think any mandates on businesses can be passed. What should I do?
Well, I think then you could take a softer approach, if you will, and try to educate businesses that it does make sense to recycle and reduce their waste, that it's in their best interest to do so because it's cost effective and improves the bottom line. So an approach you might take is to really concentrate on outreach and getting information to businesses and targeting those businesses that you think are generating a lot of material that could be recycled. An example might be office buildings that generate a lot of paper that is very easily recycled.
I know for instance, in some companies, the bins are there, but I'm not sure anybody's really collecting them and taking them to a recycling center. And is that something that people coordinate with their regular garbage collection? That have a separate truck come and take the recyclables away, or is this something that a company needs to appoint somebody in their office? Okay, it's your job to take all the recyclables away. How do companies tackle that?
Well, in most cases, the refuse company will collect the recyclable material separately. In some cases, the service provider for refuse service is different than the service provider for recycling services. But it's very important that it is convenient for people to recycle and that there is a place for them to put this material and then follow that up with separate collection and processing.
Okay, very good. This question's for Jack, and it comes from Kay in Sacramento. She says, our composting facility is not permitted to take food waste. How can I add food waste to my program? That's probably, I think people in a lot of different areas are wondering that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would suggest composting facilities currently are permitted under tiered composting regulations in California. And if a facility is permitted to handle green waste, they can actually handle vegetative food as well. So they can start off with vegetative food, maybe targeting certain large commercial generators like wholesalers or produce supermarkets. That would be a good way to start. The other thing is if a facility is interested in expanding materials beyond its existing permit, they can look at a research permit where they do basically a pilot composting phase of additional material, and that can be a stepping stone to upgrading their permit status. So I think there's ways to work with the facility to look at how to bring in additional materials within the existing tiered permitting system in California.
I was interested in San Francisco, the bins next to the recycling bins for food waste. Are you having any problems with animals getting into that? How are you sealing those things?
Yeah, well, let me just say that these kitchen pails, which are about 2 gallons, are provided to residents for them to use just inside to sort the food waste in the kitchen. Then they bring those kitchen pails out and put it into the large bin. Okay. So I think that photo where you saw that little kitchen pail next to the larger 32-gallon bin was a bit misleading in that they don't really set it out curbside. That was when they got delivered. It's like, here it is.
I see.
And that's important, actually, as part of this program, is that yard trimmings and food scraps are mixed together along with food store paper, and that helps absorb excess moisture. And residents are encouraged, if they want to use paper bags or paper to wrap the food to help keep it cleaner. But co-mingling yard trimmings and food really makes a lot of sense.
Get your mulch started right then and there.
And Mary, if I may add, I think it's also very important, Kay, for you to really look at working with the board staff in the Permitting and Enforcement Division. I know this is really an important step to get them involved, to make sure, as Jack mentioned, what is in your permit, what are you allowed to do. Get them on board, your local enforcement agency as well. Get all the key players involved, talk about what you want to do, and set up a plan so that you can get that program going. Jack, would you agree?
Absolutely.
Okay, we want to remind folks that our phone lines are open. You can call us at 1-800-497-1845, and we'll try to get your question answered. We do have a question from Dan in Monterey, and Wendy, I think you might be best to answer this. The question is, how does Alameda County's model ordinance work?
The way it works is we're requiring that all applicants, when they come into the building department to require a permit either for construction or demolition, that they fill out a waste management plan, and we provide a simple 2-page form for them to fill out in terms of what kind of materials they will be generating, how much of these materials will be disposed, and how much will be recycled. Then they need to come back and show that they have recycled 50% of their materials prior to proceeding with the permitting process. And some of the cities, I think the important thing is customizing the model ordinance. Each cities are different. Some cities have new construction with a lot of production and spec homes going on. There are cities who are just remodeling, mostly remodeling. Cities that will focus on commercial. So each city needs to customize their own ordinance and set the thresholds. When do you want the ordinance to take place or to start working? For the city of Dublin, this is a really fast-growing city. They have a lot of new construction going on. They decide to focus on them, and they have set a threshold for all development over $100,000. They need to submit a waste management plan. And in addition to that, for all development that exceeds $1 million, they need to put in a performance security, and there's a formula to determine the amount of that bond. Once the project is completed, they need to submit receipts and how they recycle the materials and where, and that will, then they can proceed with the program.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Kathy, this question is for you. How can cities help promote existing recycling businesses to help encourage more businesses to recycle? So how do you give those pats on the back and get other companies interested?
What we've done is, in the city of Fremont, we have a citywide newsletter, and we also have a business newsletter that we use to highlight businesses that have been very successful in recycling. Cities might use their website to promote businesses that have recycled successfully. Another option would be to create a brochure and to use those examples. There's nothing like a real case study to really highlight the point. So I think if you're fortunate that you do have some very successful recyclers in your community, it's really important to give them kudos and to try to promote what they're doing.
I agree. This one, Kara, might be best answered by you, but anyone else can chime in too. How can we add recycling requirements to existing landfill and transfer station permits? It comes from Bernie in Oakland.
I think one of the first places you have to start is understanding what the permit requirements are and what you're trying to accomplish. That's really an important start. It's important to involve all of the key players. We've seen a lot of changes, both with landfills and transfer stations, a willingness to do more diversion at those facilities. So it's really important to sit down, discuss what the goals are with all the key players, and try and come up with a plan around that.
Anybody else have anything you want to add in on that? What do you see as the biggest challenge in terms of recycling and getting jurisdictions involved in the year 2000 and beyond? What are the biggest challenges we're facing?
Well, I think that some of the topics we talked about as far as organics and C&D diversion is critical. California is in a growth mode. We're having an economic boom. We're seeing a lot of construction and demolition projects going on. It's really critical that in communities where there's a tremendous amount of growth, that they look at some of these case studies and what other jurisdictions are doing, programs that are not costing them a lot to implement, that are getting them a lot of diversion. And for many communities who have not yet focused on the organic waste stream, and if that does make up a large portion of the waste stream, they really need to also look at those communities, like San Francisco, for example, that's implemented successful organics programs. And if you think about it, if San Francisco can do it, just about anyone can. That's a tough community, a lot of windy roads, a high-density area. So it's really, I encourage you to look at the case studies, utilize what experience is out there from these other jurisdictions that are getting to the 50% goal, and some have made it.
We've got a question from Lars in San Diego. The question is, I don't understand what is meant by deconstruction and how should we promote it?
Deconstruction can be defined as, if you think of constructing a building, this is deconstructing the building. So it's dismantling a building carefully in order to be able to salvage the materials and recycle the materials. That's what deconstruction is. And the way you promote it is, a lot of, this has been practiced in the past, well, instead of just demolishing a building, people will salvage some of the materials. And so if you have any salvagers in the community, you may want to talk to them about that. This is also a good opportunity for job training. There are some case studies, as Kara had mentioned, that you may want to check out on deconstructing.
What kind of materials are you talking about? Is it primarily lumber? Is it stuff that was inside the building that might otherwise have been junked or sent to the landfill?
It's a combination of that.
We saw one shot, I think, of a recovery place in the East Bay that had all sorts of basins and toilets and things like that. Is that what we're talking about when we talk about deconstruction?
Well, with deconstruction, deconstruction is mostly lumber, and it works really well, especially if you have large buildings such as warehouses. We're talking about old growth, unpainted, untreated wood. So this is the kind of materials that we're talking about.
And I know that in some areas, for people who like antiques and such, getting an old window out of a Victorian, salvaging something like that, can actually be worth quite a bit of money.
Absolutely.
So we've got an email here from San Luis Obispo. Jean writes to us, we have issues with stormwater runoff. How are large composting facilities addressing this issue?
Well, I guess it's composting. You should take a crack at that.
Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I guess one thing related to stormwater runoff is street sweepings. There are more and more communities now, particularly in Southern California, and we're looking at this as well, taking street sweepings and bringing it to a compost facility and composting it, because much of what in street sweepings is organic. You may want to screen out the grit and the sand, and then you have a material that can be used for different landscaping purposes or cover. So I would think that addresses the street sweeping question, and I think stormwater runoff is certainly related to that.
Absolutely. I know a friend of mine lives in Sacramento, and they do the yard-based collection, and she said that it has really encouraged folks in her neighborhood. Everyone is much more conscious about their front yards and such, because they say, oh, well, the Joneses have a big pile of clippings. We better get busy, you know. So, the collection methods are very good, so they don't have any of those storm problems.
And I just want to add something. If the questioner was really looking at how does a facility deal with a lot of heavy rain at the facility, then that becomes a facility design and operational issue, so that they have good drainage at the facility and that they have collection ponds and that the material doesn't get too wet. Composting material tends to actually absorb more water, so that there might be less runoff than if they were just an open piece of land. So that's addressing the issue of stormwater runoff at composting facilities.
Okay, Gina.
Some communities have chosen to have the material put out in containers as opposed to loose on the curb to reduce the amount of green waste that's actually going into the storm drain system. So that's another option.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Pam in San Diego County has a question. She wants to know, can grants be applied for to assist in setup costs, and if so, from whom? Where do you get the money? Shall I start? Go ahead. So there are numerous grant opportunities out there. Let's start at the federal level first. Federal EPA offers a number of pollution prevention grants annually. You can get information off of EPA's website for that information. The California Waste Management Board also has a myriad of grants that they offer to local jurisdictions, from everything from a farm and ranch cleanup to used oil grants. So there are a number of opportunities there. And by, again, going to the website, if you have access, you can click on grants and you'll get all of that information. Moving down to the local level, there are a number of local jurisdictions that offer grants to commercial businesses, to their haulers. As we saw, Michael Gross received a grant from City of San Jose to do their food diversion project. So I encourage you, if you're interested in grant programs, to contact your local community programs to see what they have to offer. And sometimes you'll find grants in other areas within your community, not necessarily under the recycling heading. Yeah, so check out that website too. Here's a great question. It comes from Charles in Fairfax, Virginia. He says, how do you handle deconstruction and demolition of pre-1976 buildings in which they're likely to contain asbestos and lead-based paint? How do you identify such buildings in advance and ensure that the demolition materials coming into your site are not contaminated? That's a biggie.
That is very important, Charles. I'm glad that you brought that up. That's one area that we don't want to touch. Right? So we want to stay away as far as we could from asbestos. There are some de-leading techniques that people are doing when deconstructing materials. So we can de-lead, but as far as asbestos, that needs to be handled separately. What we want to recover are lumber and building materials that can be used now. So anybody else want to add to that?
Okay. Kara and Kathy, I think the two of you might be able to help me with this one. It's from Peter in Riverside. He says, my planning department is too busy to deal with me. How do I get them to work on recycling requirements? Short of banging down the door or anything else?
Well, sometimes it may be worth taking on some of the work yourself, as opposed to trying to, you give the planning department an incentive to do that. And, I understand that, many departments are understaffed and under-resourced. So you may want to consider what can you do. Bring a program to them that you've really thought through, that you're willing to staff and do the work, and you might just need some input from them. So that may be one option for you. Kara, I don't know if you've got anything.
I think that covers it very well. In most cases, what we've seen is just by talking to the planning department, explaining what you're trying to accomplish, and finding out from them how what you're trying to get at can be worked into how they already do business. And that's really what we're looking at, not adding more work to the planning department's activities, but how can we maybe change the way we do business, reinvent the way we do business, and in some cases it may actually make their job easier, and that's what we've seen in some communities.
It also helps to get the council support. If you get direction from above, usually it's a lot better. With the C&D ordinance, that's what I found. If council direction, city manager said, yes, we want to do that, that really helps.
But I think it's important to be willing to do some of the work, too. I think it's more difficult to get participation from another department if you say, well, here's what I want to do, but I want you to do the work. So I think if you're willing to do some of the upfront work for them, then that may help your cause.